Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. The sentencing of President Trump for an unconstitutional guilty verdict in New York. A state cannot level a federal crime at anyone, especially if the FEC dropped the case and the DOJ was not involved. Unconstitutional. The sentencing is going to be postponed, likely indefinitely. It'll never happen. Likely. And the second that they do try to sentence, that will expedite the Supreme Court to then take on this case, which they've already taken on, and overturn the unconstitutional guilty verdict, which they've essentially already done. That's why you have Democrats pushing for an amendment to the Constitution to actually overrule the immunity decision, which only Democrats would do. They want to pack the Supreme Court, impeach Supreme Court justices. They talk about democracy, but if it doesn't go their way, they want to do away with pillars of our republic like the Supreme Court. Nico, hello. D'Artagnan, hello. Everyone here to my super chat, thank you so very, very much. Hit subscribe. Let's get started. They're already getting sued, ladies and gentlemen, based on the Supreme Court immunity victory. To my super chat again, thank you so very, very much. Let's listen to this.
Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey has been busy. He just sued New York State to protect former President Trump from being sentenced in the phony trial against him. As you know, it was a spectacle in the state of New York a couple of months ago. New York Attorney General Letitia James has responded, saying Missouri's lawsuit is based entirely on an ongoing criminal case between the Manhattan District Attorney and former President Trump and does not present an actual controversy between sovereign states. Missouri's claims are patently meritless. Andrew Bailey, Missouri's Attorney General, is with me now. Now, I've seen a lot on this. I want to hear directly from you. And what exactly is the goal?
Well, our goal here is to eliminate this illicit witch hunt prosecution in New York that's hijacking a presidential election and injecting poison into our democratic process. Look, the state of Missouri has a sovereign interest in participating in a national election on equal footing with every other state, and yet a rogue prosecutor and collusive judiciary in the state of New York, again, have hijacked that process and deprived Missourians of access to a presidential candidate, and with a gag order deprived Missourians of the right to hear from a presidential candidate. And courts should stay out of any decision, any case that's going to cause election interference. Those concerns are certainly heightened the closer in time we get to an election. And this is the heat of a campaign in the presidential election, in the most consequential national election in this nation's history. And so Missouri's fighting for its rights and its voice in the process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a nuanced view at this, but it's not unheard of. And could other Republican-led states or Republican or just other attorneys general jump on board with?
If New York prosecutors have taken it upon themselves in 2024 to influence November of 2024, to influence the presidential contest, it's only fair that other states say, wait a second, we're conservative or we like Trump, and we're not Tammany Hall Democrats in New York. We want to have a say in this as well. New York cannot just simply influence the entire country by trying to convict a Republican candidate for president without a conservative attorney general saying, hey, wait a second, we want our say as well.
With this.
Yeah, certainly that's true. And we've had multiple other Republican states join amicus briefs in support of this lawsuit. Our founding fathers contemplated that there would be legal disputes amongst the states. And so they codified an original action docket in the form of Article 2, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. And that's where we filed the case originally with the United States Supreme Court so that we could protect Missourians' rights to have access to and hear from a presidential candidate. And I'm proud to stand with other like-minded attorneys general. Look, New York wouldn't allow a red state prosecutor to arrest and jail Kamala Harris, so we're not going to let them do that to President Trump either. Missouri had a caucus, and there are numerous electors and voters who caucused in favor of President Trump and have the right to be heard in the process.
Nico, thank you so very much. Nico, greatly appreciated, as always, and I agree with you, Nico. Could you imagine if, let's say, Kamala Harris did business in Missouri or Alabama or Florida or Texas, And you had Republicans say, you know what, there's a misdemeanor. We're going to elevate it to a felony. We don't have the federal government, but we're just going to assume the federal government has a statute that you broke, and you've convicted a crime, and now we're going to sentence you to prison. Could you imagine? They would say immediately this was interference. Oh my God, they're authoritarians. Well, when they do it, it's the rule of law, the democracy that they ousted the most popular candidate in the history of the country, apparently, who couldn't communicate even 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hadn't been talking much about this case. The sentencing is scheduled for September 18th. So we will certainly watch this. Last 10, 15 seconds, just your quick thoughts.
Yeah, look, that case needs to be thrown out. It is replete with constitutional error. It's an illicit witch hunt. We know that. The goal was never to obtain a legally valid conviction. It was always to take President Trump off the campaign trail. We can't let that happen. Attorney
General of the great state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, thank you for your time today.
So this was a huge victory for Trump. Not only what Attorney General Bailey is doing, but the fact that they're not going to sentence Trump, or I should say they likely won't sentence Trump. If they do, the Supreme Court will get involved and prevent any jail term or any prison term. And here's why.
Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor, George Washington University law professor and constitutional law attorney, and Andrew Cherkasky, former federal prosecutor. Welcome to you both. Jonathan, I'll get your top-line thoughts here. As this news breaks, I want to read you directly from Justice Sotomayor's, from her decision, her dissent, along with Jackson and Kagan in this case, that if a president, quote, orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival.
That is not allowed. It's not an official act. What Democrats have done is they said, well, because we tried to imprison Trump and our indictment was so broad and vague and ambiguous that the Supreme Court struck it down and said, yeah, he's protected under presidential immunity. Therefore, there's nothing he can't do. He can do anything possible. There was a Hollywood celebrity, if you can call this person a celebrity, who stated, oh, well, you know what? Biden should take action, and this means that all bets are off. And, I don't even want to get to the sentiment, which we saw, thank God, Trump survived. But these people believe anything. Like a lot of liberal Democrats, they're very smart, but a lot of times they lack wisdom, and they're the ones who are given information that misinforms by MSNBC, CNN, and others. Just because Trump got an immunity victory, that does not mean he can do anything as president. The problem was that Democrats used a very broad, ambiguous legal statute. Calling for the end of the life of a political opponent is not broad, ambiguous. It's a specific statute that's easily proven, or I should say easily understood. What they leveled against Trump, was the 18 U.S. Code 371 statute that's broad, all-encompassing, and that says everything he did was illegal. From a speech to speaking to political allies to speaking to his Department of Justice, all illegal because he lied. He defrauded the country. It's like, well, number one, most Republicans, by and large, agree that it wasn't fair and neutral and just like the DNC primary, just like the 2024 DNC primary where Biden won. And then, of course, he was ousted. So, it's like, but the thing is, it's like they conflate the most absurd a leap of logic with what happened. It's really like a lack of basic logic.
Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power. Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon. Immune, 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 immune. Were her words in her dissent. Your reaction at this hour?
And of course, none of those things are official acts. So I don't even, it's unbelievable.
Well, I think the problem with the dissent is that it doesn't show the same vigor in looking at the opposing view. President Obama ordered the killing of an American citizen by simply declaring him to be a terrorist without a trial. Clearly, Justice Sotomayor does not appear alarmed about that, and presumably would view that within a core function. So what the majority was trying to do here is to find something in the middle. They did not embrace the Trump sweeping arguments. They did not embrace the lower court's arguments sweeping in the other direction. But this is a major victory for the former President Trump. The language here is highly favorable to him. They even go into his January 6th speech and say that presidents are expected to speak passionately and publicly about issues of importance. This was an issue of great importance, and goes on to say that when the president speaks to the vice president, this is part of the president's official conduct. All of these statements are important because the court is giving navigational beacons for a lower court judge who is proven very favorable towards the special counsel, very motivated in getting a trial before the election. And these beacons are a bit more narrow than we expected. They're giving some very clear language and a heavy burden for Jack Smith. Now, he's not likely to go quietly into that night, but he's going to have a heck of a time trying to satisfy this burden.
Jonathan, thank you for that. Andrew Cherkasky's on set here. Jonathan, you just heard from Jonathan, you heard from Shannon. This is being seen as a major win, not only for the former president himself, but for the Trump campaign. And the timing of all of this obviously is crucial. Your reaction?
I think this totally guts Jack Smith's prosecution. And it's something that some of us have seen for a very long time coming. The idea that a president doesn't have this broad sweeping immunity would create all sorts of issues for presidents in the future and potentially in the past for acts that have been committed in the past. Now, what the court has done is they've essentially created a hierarchy. Those acts that are within the constitutional authority of the president, immune. Those that are official, those perhaps have to go back to lower courts for further analysis. And the court does say unofficial acts have no immunity to it. But I think what we have to look at is that middle category. And it really does break down the idea that at least two of the remaining charges, and last week's case in Fisher likely will eliminate 2 out of the 4 of the charges against Donald Trump right now. So really they have kind of 2 charges left. I think Jack Smith is going to have to go through, probably create a superseding indictment, send that back to the court for their new analysis under this new standard. That may go all the way back through the appellate courts, even up to the Supreme Court, to see if the lower court analyzed that correctly before we're ever talking about a trial. So I think that.
So Trump did absolutely nothing to foment, compel people to commit crimes. What Democrats said was the mere fact he disagreed with the results caused people to commit crimes. This is, of course, absurd. There was an entire summer of people committing crimes. Democrats saw 14,000 arrests. They were bailing out people. Did the rhetoric from Democrats incite or compel anyone to commit crimes all throughout the country? Billions in property damage that summer. I agree with why people peacefully protested, but there were billions in property damage. 19 lives lost that entire summer. And it's just unbelievable, the political amnesia this country has. It's unbelievable.
That even the idea that this could make it to trial with the little bit that remains, I don't think is likely, because I think this is going to go all the way back through the appellate system.
Jonathan, give me your reaction to that. And also, I want to highlight something you put out in the moments following this on the no protection for unofficial acts. So the issue is whether.
Rebecca, thank you for the kind words.
Or what constitutes official acts. It is very much for Trump in the sense that the court rejected the lower court and recognizes some immunity. That will further delay the lower court proceedings, to Andrew's point, but Trump will have to argue that his actions fall within these navigational beacons. How do you see that playing out specifically?
Well, I think that this goes back with a heavy advantage for Trump on those questions because of the language used by the court. It is clearly telegraphing that there is a heavy presumption here, not just in terms of the general constitutional standard, but this specific case. Many people expected the court to avoid the specifics in the case. It did not. And it left language to guide this court. Now, in terms of how this plays out, even with a judge who's been quite favorable to the special counsel, it's going to be difficult to satisfy this burden, particularly with regard to things like the January 6th speech, which the special counsel has referred to a great deal. Many of us believe that President Trump was protected entirely in that speech under the First Amendment. The court is saying here that he also may be protected as a point of presidential duties, that it's expected for presidents to be able to speak on these types of issues. So going forward, it's going to get tough because Jack Smith is known as someone who tends to double down on weak hands. I mean, he's not someone that yields readily to a president. That's why he was unanimously overturned in a previous high-profile case. So he's just, what's interesting about this case is that this is following a haymaker in Fisher, which could knock out 2 of the 4 counts in D.C., but not necessarily. Justice Jackson gave him a roadmap of how he might still be able to argue obstruction. I wrote a column today saying that if he follows Judge Jackson's advice, I think he will be overturned again. But he may still try to keep this on the runway to take off. I personally think that these 2 opinions have ripped the wings off his case.
So what happens is when the Democrats went after Trump with the Mueller probe, now with this politically motivated nonsense, they said, he wasn't a Kremlin operative, but he obstructed justice. Now with the immunity decision, they're not going to be able to convict him, but he obstructed justice. If only he just didn't obstruct, we'd find that, holy grail of evidence to imprison him forever. It's like they make things up all the time, and then they stand behind the sanctity of their indictment or of courts that side with them while they go after the court in Florida, the Supreme Court. If they don't get their way, the court that prevents them from getting their way is illegitimate. When they get their way, suddenly they love the court. It's about the rule of law.
But Jack Smith is someone who does not readily yield to these types of setbacks.
And there is an issue, a huge issue, just switching topics for a second, about, yet again, they're probably going to pay another campaign finance violation fine, which is hilarious because the whole hush money thing is predicated upon a federal campaign finance criminal statute that apparently doesn't exist. They haven't even told the world which statute they're using because the FEC dropped the hush money case. But listen to this.
Former President Trump's campaign filing a complaint yesterday with the Federal Election Commission against President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, accusing them of violating campaign finance laws by transferring Biden's campaign money over to Kamala Harris. The Trump campaign's general counsel writing this in the complaint, Kamala Harris is seeking to perpetuate a $91.5 million heist of Joe Biden's leftover campaign money, a brazen money grab that would constitute the single largest excessive contribution and biggest violation in the history of the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971. Joining me now is election lawyer, Holtzman Vogel partner and general counsel to numerous Senate and House campaigns, Steve Roberts. Steve, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Do you agree with the Trump take on this?
I absolutely agree that filing the complaint was the right thing to do. Look, there's a theory that says that, okay, if a presidential nominee and a vice presidential nominee can share a committee, then they share in the funds. Okay, that's fine. But Biden was never the presidential nominee. Harris was never the vice presidential nominee in this cycle. So, frankly, the funds aren't theirs to share. The Trump campaign did the right thing by filing this complaint. The problem is these things take time to play out. They filed the complaint with the FEC. There's certain statutory timelines that the FEC must follow in terms of pursuing that complaint. And if they move at lightning speed, which I have total confidence they will, that puts us right up to the eve of the election before this can even happen. In the meantime, the Harris campaign is spending down those funds. The funds aren't frozen. So they definitely needed to pursue it so that they could call out what this is, a candidate seizing the funds of another candidate. we might know something in, frankly, a few years from now. If you look back at sort of the last phony transfer, when the Hillary campaign and the DNC colluded to hide payments for the Steele dossier, that was absolutely prohibited, the way in which they did that. But the fine wasn't issued until 6 years after the fact.
Yeah. Can't they make the argument that this was always Biden-Harris's money? Because, I think they knew Joe Biden's cognitive issues before he walked into the Oval Office. I mean, let's face it. They started calling the administration the Biden-Harris administration. When do we ever do that? Right? It's always what? The Clinton administration, the Trump administration, the Bush administration. You don't put the vice president's name in there, but they did. Why? They did because they wanted it to be fluid when and if this happened, and they knew it was coming because they knew Joe Biden had massive cognitive issues. So can't they make the argument, no, it's just Biden-Harris money?
The Democrats will make that argument. Clearly, the Democrats knew this all along. But the deal is the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, doesn't much care. They'll look at what the Federal Election Campaign Act says. And what they should do at this point under the federal election law is refund every single dollar that someone donated to the Biden campaign for the November election. And here's why. Federal election law is really clear that if a candidate does not run for the general election, but receives contributions for that general election, the campaign doesn't have a choice. They have 60 days from the day that candidate dropped out to put the money back in donors' pockets. And Biden will not be a candidate for president in November. Yeah. And Harris, who also shared that committee, will not be a candidate for vice president in November. So the campaign has no choice, right? We shouldn't even get to the point where the Biden campaign has the money to transfer to Harris. It needs to go back to the donors.
Yeah. Jonathan, I know I want to get your take. You all work together as well. Some Republicans and conservative organizations are floating this potential legal challenge to keep Harris's name off of the November ballot and keep Biden's name on it. The Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project said in a June memo that there is potential for pre-election litigation in Georgia, Nevada, Wisconsin if Biden dropped out of the election. They say that Wisconsin specifically does not allow the withdrawal of a presidential nominee for any reason besides death. Do you think there's a case, Jonathan?
Yeah, I don't think that will ultimately have legs, but it's a good point because he didn't, nothing happened to him, at least what they're telling us. He didn't have a stroke. He didn't die. So I think it is a really interesting point. But I would like to ask Steve a quick question. When you talk about people getting refunds for their donation, is there a way that people can seek their refund now? Because I gather the Democrats aren't going to eagerly give this money back. But what if people believed in Biden, believed in these lies that he was okay because they...
So, unfortunately, media is an extension of the Democratic Party. Democrats will just take the fine. They'll just pay the fine, and they'll convict Trump of campaign finance violations while they blatantly, overtly, break campaign finance laws. The issue, ladies and gentlemen, I've been thinking about this for a while. If, Trump is going to win, unless there's some very bizarre occurrences, Trump will win. Okay. But as long as media, and Trump is going to do special counsel after special counsel, it will be very, very interesting. Democrats suddenly will lose faith in the rule of law. But unless conservatives or unless Trump Republicans or unless media moves a little bit more to the center or even more conservative, away from the Democratic Party, until Trump gets more favorable media coverage, that is a huge, because Trump is not dealing with the Democrats. The Democrats are like completely inept. They're like the Keystone Cops of politics. They're, oust their political candidate. Then they say this is a wonderful thing for democracy. It's like, well, this is the antithesis of democracy. But see, the thing is, a lot of Americans, half the country is enamored with media still. Or I should say influenced greatly by media. And so as long as Democrats have that political influence or that propaganda wing of the Democratic Party called American media, it's going to be a very difficult thing because Trump, even if he does great with the economy, great in terms of foreign policy, finds out that they committed numerous crimes with special counsels, you will have pushback, not just from the Democratic Party, you'll have pushback from all of media and Hollywood. So there's got to be some way to get conservative voices. I mean, I'm talking about mainstream. Obviously, there's Ben Shapiro, and there's huge conservative voices. Okay, Tim Pool's not a conservative, but he's a huge, amazing, powerful voice. Tim Pool is awesome. Love Tim Pool. There's a lot of great, voices out there, but I'm talking about mainstream. Mainstream. As long as mainstream is an extension of the Democratic Party, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a big obstacle for conservatives for Trump.
They've repeated them over and over again. So people trusted them that President Biden was okay to do the job currently and okay to do it in the future. Is there a way that they can get their money back? Because essentially they've been defrauded of their hard-earned money and they believe something that wasn't true.
Absolutely, Jonathan. I mean, a donor should contact the Biden campaign, see how they respond. I'm pretty confident that the Harris campaign, the replacement Biden campaign, will not respond favorably, will not give that money back. They certainly could. But the deal is they're obligated to under federal election law.
Mm-hmm. Trump asking this in a Truth Social post on Sunday after Biden dropped out of the race, quote, shouldn't the Republican Party be reimbursed for the fraud, for the time and money it spent campaigning against Biden? Everybody around Joe, including his doctors and the fake news media, knew he was not capable of running for president, Steve. I mean, what gives here now that it's clear that lots of people around Biden were hiding his true state, mental state?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And frankly, the ones who were really defrauded were those donors who believed in the Biden campaign, believed in the president, believed that the Democrats were being honest about his mental capacities.
So the same thing happened in 2016. Democrats just don't care. Really quickly, I want to just show you, this is 5 days ago, ladies and gentlemen. Suddenly they say Harris caught up. She's even ahead of Trump. It's like, how do you get such amazing momentum in 2 or 3 or 4 days? I just don't get it, but that's media. And this is, by the way, before Harris is now tied with Trump, or she's cut into the polling lead. It's been like 4 or 5 days since she took over.
Harris versus Trump. Not much different. Harris does do a point better than Biden. 45 goes to 46. In the average, Trump stays at 47. So at least at the beginning, if Democrats do go with Harris, they'd be taking a candidate trailing by 2 on average, replacing with a candidate who trails by 1 on average. Of course, the question is the introduction of Kamala Harris as a presidential candidate, the Democratic convention, the new attention on her. Would that help those numbers? Would that improve them? Conversely, would that hurt those numbers potentially if the rollout doesn't go that well? Those are some of the variables, though, but that's the starting point on head-to-head. And we also look at the basic image of each candidate when we ask the question, favorable or...
Now, this is important, ladies and gentlemen. You've had 8 years now. You've had 8 years of nonstop 24/7 lies and deceit and information that misinforms about Trump, and he still has a higher favorability than both Biden and Harris.
Unfavorable view do you have? Again, the average for Joe Biden has been very bad. 36% favorable, 57% unfavorable. Now, Kamala Harris, where does she clock in here? Little bit better, but not much. 36 to 38 on the favorable side, and the unfavorable comes down 57 to 52. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who she'd like to run against now, you see where he stands. These numbers are a bit better.
There has been zero negative media coverage mainstream of Harris. I wouldn't say zero, but not really much. I mean, they've circled the wagons now. Media is an extension of the Democratic Party. They turned on Biden for the past 3 weeks to a month. Okay, that was really bad for the Democratic Party, actually. They destroyed their brand every single day by turning on Biden. Harris is 52% unfavorable. There hasn't been a concerted effort to disparage Kamala Harris by mainstream media. There has been with Trump, and he has about the same unfavorable. Could you imagine if the country knows a little bit more about Harris, a little bit more about the things that she didn't do or that she should have done, and, her track record as vice president, which nobody knows what on earth she accomplished. Okay, she was in charge of the border, and now they're saying she wasn't, but of course she was. So look at Trump, 41% favorable, 55 unfavorable. That was with all of media accusing him of everything under the sun. If American media stayed out of politics, meaning if they didn't pick a political side, you would have 55% favorable for Trump and 41% unfavorable. Okay, Trump would run away with it. Okay, if Democrats didn't have an actual propaganda arm, like an actual public relations wing of the Democratic Party called media, I don't know how they'd win. Then, of course, there's other, wonderful, lawful things they do to win. But just look at these numbers. It's unbelievable. The people don't realize, like, Trump is running a 4.240 with a 100-pound backpack. And he still has better numbers, favorable numbers than Harris and Biden.
For him than they've been in the past. 41% favorable, 55 unfavorable. And again, whether it's Kamala Harris or if it happens to be anybody else, whoever emerges as the Democratic candidate, just the basic challenge they're facing is this. Here is the road to 270 electoral votes, and you see the 6 core swing states right here that are expected to decide the presidency. You see Harris would have to win a number of those states here. But the other challenge for her, and something that drove Biden from this race, is that Democrats were starting to get indications outside of these battleground states of unexpected trouble in places like Virginia, New Hampshire, Maine. In the popular vote in Maine, they give out electoral votes by congressional district there, even potentially in a state like Minnesota. So for Harris or whoever the Democratic nominee becomes, the two challenges are, first of all, shore up states like that Democrats weren't expecting to have to sweat over, and then get to work in those battleground states. Again, all those battleground states in 2020 were Joe Biden states, Lester.
Thanks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, so he has better favorability numbers, and now we're talking about a sentencing being postponed because yet again, the Supreme Court sided with Trump. It's going to be very interesting. What can I tell you other than, you know what? God bless you all, everyone watching. I can't thank you enough. It is an honor and a pleasure. I'm blessed to speak to every single one of you throughout the world. I am focused on November 5th, 6th, 7th, or as Democrats call it, election month. But November 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and we'll find out Trump wins the 9th and 10th. And be here, ladies and gentlemen. It's history in the making. God bless you all. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Starting August, I will be doing 2 live streams a day. In addition to working on the stock market crash channel and the Bitcoin crash channel, I think, unfortunately, there's a crash for both ahead, a financial crash. And I'll